Picture this. It's 2016. Famed video game developer Blizzard has just released their first brand new IP since 1998. A company known for their groundbreaking games that alter the very fabric of the industry. They've changed MMOs with World of Warcraft, real-time strategies with StarCraft, action RPGs with Diablo, and now it was time for them to try their hand at a brand new genre, the first-person shooter. For this game, they would look outside of their wheelhouse to try something unique, something that they could make that utilizes their strength as a studio, something accessible and easy to play with mountains of depth hiding beneath the surface like all of their other games. Looking internally at other Activision studios like Infinity Ward and Treyarch, they would capture what makes Call of Duty so compelling: the addictive moment-to-moment gameplay, the sound design that makes every shot fired and every point scored feel like a rush. They would look outward into the market to see what other shooters are doing well. The game couldn't just be another deathmatch shooter. There are already so many of those out there. What could Blizzard do to utilize their fantastic art department known for creating some of the most iconic characters in gaming? What could they look to for inspiration to make an eclectic cast of interesting characters, all with their own unique playstyles? I mean, the answer couldn't be any more obvious. With influences from Call of Duty, Team Fortress 2, and a little bit of old school arena shooters like Quake and Half-Life for good measure, Overwatch was born, and it's still alive 8 years later, living a happy, healthy life. Except that's not entirely true. If you've been a frequent internet connoisseur over the past few years, there's no doubt you've heard of the term "inshitification" before. Merriam-Webster defines the term as, quote, the degradation in the quality and experience of online platforms over time due to an increase in advertisements, costs, or features, end quote. It's a term that gets used more and more often these days as services become more and more unsustainable in today's current climate. And it has happened to Overwatch as well. Overwatch used to be a really fantastic 6v6 hero shooter with engaging gameplay, but over time, Blizzard kept introducing these small, seemingly innocuous updates that would change the balance of the game. Things deemed too powerful were removed. Characters had their entire kits updated or changed. A role queue was made mandatory in order to ensure the quality of a match, and then the game was balanced around that. These updates would just keep coming until eventually they made the promise of a fully fledged PvE mode that would come with Overwatch 2. A product that is not a sequel, but an update that took away more than it added. An update that would both cut the promised PvE mode and reduce team sizes to 5 instead of 6 in order to more finely tune the balance of the game.
Right.
Every update to Overwatch would come to inshitify the game a little more with every passing update. Loot boxes to earn free cosmetics for your characters are gone. Now you can only buy things via an in-game shop or through premium currency you earn from the battle pass and weekly missions. And now skins cost a minimum of $10, which, let's be real, is a complete scam when I've been earning them for years playing Overwatch 1. They removed the fun and chaotic nature of the game in an attempt to justify the 2 at the end of the title, and as a way to generate profit from a game that was deemed too player friendly. Overwatch wasn't Overwatch anymore, all because it didn't make enough money. And now, Overwatch as I know it today is not the same Overwatch I fell in love with. It is a shambling, reanimated corpse masquerading as something it just isn't anymore. After watching the recent Overwatch Spotlight that released last week, I couldn't be any more certain in that assessment. For the past 2 years, Blizzard has been actively working on Overwatch 2, a game that was sold to players under false pretenses. And only just now are the developers getting back into the driver's seat and saying that they're actually doing the work to justify that 2 at the end. But these updates aren't even for Overwatch anymore. With Season 15, Blizzard is introducing a perk system to the game that allows players to level up during matches, giving them access to new sets of abilities as well as ones that used to be in the game. And now they're finally going deep into the character building aspect that was supposed to be in the game at launch, where players could level up their characters and equip them with new abilities, but now it's being sold to players as this brand new PvP Counter-Strike mode with currency, a shopping phase, and upgrade mechanics that make it unrecognizable to what it used to be. Loot boxes are making a return. Overwatch Classic is making a comeback where you can play during specific metas. And guys, they're finally adding back ranked portraits. Everything old is new again. Everything old is new again, and again, and again, and again, and it's never ending. Every time I look at Overwatch, I feel like I'm in a fucking asylum full of dementia-ridden old people that can do nothing but repeat the same mistakes over and over again like a fucking broken record. It's ridiculous. Every time they take a step forward, they make 7 steps back, and they are only just now trying to rectify their own mistakes. Why people stick around only to be whipped and gaslit by a developer who thinks you can play the old version of the game as a treat need a reality check. It's embarrassing. But enough about Overwatch for a second. If you want an Overwatch sucks and was better 8 years ago kind of video, I'm sure there are plenty of those out there. But this isn't that video. See, I think it's a lot more interesting to talk about the new up-and-comer to the hero shooter space, which is Marvel Rivals. I've been playing Marvel Rivals a lot recently, and I really wanted to talk about it. Overwatch has been on the decline over these past few years because it's a game that keeps ruining itself. And here comes this unassuming Marvel team shooter from NetEase, taking everything that Blizzard built, sometimes even wholesale, and capitalizing on the failures that Blizzard keep making. And they have free reign to do so because Overwatch simply isn't the game it used to be in 2016. It has changed, metamorphosized into something unrecognizable. Overwatch today is not the game I fell in love with. And now, Marvel Rivals has come to fill that gaping hole in my heart that Overwatch left behind so many years ago. This is a video about why Marvel Rivals never needed to beat Overwatch, because Overwatch committed the gargantuan task of defeating itself. So if you like long-form discussion videos like this and want to see more in the future, be sure to like and subscribe down below for more. Now let's take a look at what makes Marvel Rivals so important in today's gaming space. See, Marvel Rivals seemingly came out of nowhere in December of 2024, and it blew up. And when I mean blew up, I mean blew up. On Steam alone, it attracted over 600,000 players in its first month and is still maintaining a solid 250,000 players even a few months later. Usually, live service shooters fall off slowly but surely after launch and kind of peter out after a few months. But since release, Marvel Rivals has held strong to its 250,000 player mark since its release in December. Sure, it hasn't been a long time since release, but the gaming world moves fast today. If a game doesn't have the sauce it needs to sustain, it would have died by now. But Marvel Rivals is holding incredibly strong despite its relative newness. It requires mentioning that Overwatch would not have taken off if not for Blizzard's value as a developer and Activision's massive investment in the game as a live service. The same can also be said of Marvel Rivals. If you launch a hero shooter in today's gaming world, you need to make extra damn sure that it has a cast of characters that people can latch onto. Characters with unique abilities that are fun to use, and gameplay that people will come back to for years to come. Many of these games have come and gone over the past 8 years. Quake Champions, Battleborn, Lawbreakers, Concord, all valiant attempts to break into the hero shooter market, but none of them really had the staying power that Marvel does. Marvel today is a worldwide phenomenon despite the movies continuing to slack recently. But the characters in these films still hold a lot of weight outside of the movies because of their deep, rich history in comics. Let's be honest here, Marvel Rivals would not have gotten off the ground and into so many people's hands without the Marvel branding. It is essential to the game's success at this point. The Marvel wrapper is required, but the 6v6 gameplay is what is getting people to stay in the long term. A lot of that has to do with how enticing the gameplay formula is. It's a formula that requires very little changes, so NetEase copied Blizzard's homework pretty much to a T. From a cursory glance, it looked like the only real changes Marvel Rivals made to the 6v6 hero shooter formula Blizzard established in 2016 was that it was now third person and it had destructible environments. To be frank, when I first saw Marvel Rivals, it looked like an incredibly uninspired copycat, so I chose to ignore it. I didn't want to play it. I was jaded, disillusioned with the hero shooter. Being burned by Overwatch time and time again, I just couldn't see myself liking it, so I rejected it for my own sanity. But my friends kept poking and prodding for me to play. This clearly wasn't some flavor of the month fad. So, despite my better judgment, I decided to install it. And after a microsecond of pressing that Find Match button, something happened to me. It felt like coming home to a simpler time, when things weren't micro-balanced around the top 1% of players, when role queue was gone, when you could just boot up the game, find a match, and get gaming within seconds. No more priority queue for picking support or tanks because no one else wanted to play them. Just press the button and go. Sure, it means that not every match is going to be this heavily curated back and forth between equally skilled players, but sometimes I just want to open a game and get playing, you know? And Marvel Rivals does just that. The best part is that it didn't just feel like Overwatch 1, but it felt like a true improvement of what the 6v6 team-based formula could be. It takes what Overwatch 1 did well when it launched and adds upon that addictive gameplay in new and fun ways that give the game some flavor. 6v6 is deeply important to the roots of the hero shooter formula. Now that we've had time away from it with Overwatch 2, I can't help but miss it more and more with every passing day. 6-player teams just feels right to me. It actually feels like a team of players grouping up to take down the enemy. When it's 5 people, it just feels empty by comparison. 6 players means abilities are flying off every which way. It can be hard to understand what's going on because fights happen so much quicker. Attacks are lethal, and time to kill feels much faster than it does in other contemporary shooters. In order to make Rivals feel like the original Overwatch, capturing that feeling of being in a wild and full battlefield could only really be accomplished by going with 6v6. Which also feels much more on brand to Marvel. It's a franchise all about teaming up to conquer the larger threat. And 6 characters fighting on both sides, dealing out massive destruction to both the players and the environment, are vital parts to feeling like a superhero. And the game nails everything about that power fantasy. Not only that, but it recaptures that feeling of intense, visceral madness that would happen in Overwatch 1, where every team fight feels like a scrap. Ultimates are flying off, projectiles are fired non-stop. You're constantly trying to get a bearing on your surroundings while trying to capture the point. And I've missed this so much. You can't get this feeling in any other game. Is it balanced? Of course not, but neither was Overwatch when it launched. Having the ability for a team to pick whatever character they want and not being forced into a role is deeply important to the foundation of the hero shooter, but it can lead to some deeply unbalanced matches. You're going to have a guy that only wants to play Psylocke because he bought the Vampire Nurse Gunnar skin, like yours truly, and you really need a tank, but no one will switch off. But I would much prefer it this way if I'm being completely honest with you. When I load into a match of Marvel Rivals, I want to play what I want. Sure, I want to win, but my main objective is to just have a good time. And every time I play, I always have a good time, even when I lose. Matches don't overstay their welcome, and the game feels much more casual as a result of the lack of enforcing rules. Every time I load in, I get the vibe check, I pick a character I enjoy playing or try a new one, and I lock in. And if it's not quite working out, I swap. It's as simple as that. If you treat the game with the same type of tension you would a Counter-Strike game, you're missing the point entirely. Marvel Rivals isn't supposed to be a hardcore PvP shooter, it's more like a Halo match. You shoot the shit, you kill the enemy, and you play King of the Hill or Payload. It's not that deep, and that's what I love about it. That casual nature is what was lost when Overwatch swapped to 5v5. It made the game much more try-hard. If one person wasn't carrying their weight as their role, player and team morale would crumble. People would start pointing fingers, even in a quick play match, because when you queue for a role you want to play or are forced to play, you are expected to play that role well. And if you aren't doing that, you are going to get berated for it. Now, I don't speak for everyone here when I talk about Overwatch, of course. Some people prefer the 5v5 structure, and others prefer 6v6. 5v5 has the benefit of adding more structure to the experience, but that is not what drew me to the game in the first place. What drew me in was the casual 6v6 team format with just an added hair of competitiveness. Each player is expected to do something, but the onus for playing poorly is less concentrated on a single player and shared more broadly. And that is present here in Marvel Rivals. And when there are no required roles or limits other than one of each character per team, it becomes more of a free-for-all for everyone. Teams have a way of balancing themselves out eventually, and I think it's because of how fun all of the characters are to play. Well, mostly, but we'll get into that. It can be a little overwhelming when you see a character roster as large as Marvel Rivals if you don't have any experience with hero shooters. But thankfully, I came in with pre-existing knowledge from Overwatch, so once I got my hands on a few characters and put an hour in, it was like riding a bike. Remember earlier when I mentioned that character abilities are lifted wholesale from Overwatch? That wasn't a simple exaggeration. Many abilities in Marvel Rivals are just straight up bar for bar replications, but what it does differently is use the existing framework of these Marvel heroes to mix and match abilities freely while giving them their own flavor from a lore perspective. Let's take a look at Star-Lord, for example, our resident Tracer clone. Star-Lord has Tracer's pulse pistols, small, rapid-fire weapons that shoot in a scatter shot that work best in close range. They also share a blink dash, helping them get out of trouble easier, and keeping with Tracer's annoying maneuverability, he also gets the added ability to fly for a short duration, allowing him to function more like a bug that gets into places you don't want him to be. However, that is where the similarities end. While Star-Lord gets Tracer's pistols and blink, her recall ability is instead given to Psylocke and Black Panther as a team-up ability with magic. So you can see bits and pieces of the Overwatch ability roster tastefully spread across the entirety of the Marvel Rivals cast in a way that makes it very easy to digest for players that are familiar with either game, like how a Dota player would be familiar jumping into a League game, for instance. There are analogs, but not exact copies. Now, this can have the downside of character kits feeling more or less homogenous. Many characters share very similar playstyles to each other, and roles feel less defined than they would in Overwatch, for example. Roles in Rivals are much more fluid, which I think works to its advantage. Every role in Rivals plays like a DPS and has a very damaging primary attack, so tanks and healers can hit just as hard as any DPS could. The trade-off is that DPS rely more on getting into enemy backlines and into positions that let them secure kills easier. DPS can fly, jump high, become invulnerable for short periods, all to make them survive a little longer and to make them harder to hit. Healers are definitely very strong in the current iteration of Marvel Rivals. It doesn't feel like I'm forced to eat my veggies when I'm playing healer because they can both deal damage and heal at the same time. It's like if you took DPS Moira and made every healer that capable, which seems to solve the problem of people not wanting to play healers all that much. Turns out, all you have to do is let the healer hit and heal like a dump truck at the same time. Who knew? My only real complaint with character roles is the tank role. Playing tanks in Rivals it's weird. Every time I play a tank in Rivals, I can never seem to find the pulse of the role, and I think it has to do with just how little their role seems to matter in the greater scheme of things. Tank characters in Rivals still block damage with shields and massive health pools, but what they contribute to the fight feels very minimal compared to a healer or DPS. You can see that they block absurd amounts of damage with walls and temporary bubble shields, but they don't hold a front line like an Overwatch tank would, at least in my personal experience. They're not super imposing, but they're not pushovers either. I loved playing tanks in Overwatch because it felt like I was the front line. I was a hardcore Winston main back in the day because of how enjoyable his kit is. Jump in, poke, get the healers, jump out, and take the eyes off the front line in order to push the objective. Hulk is probably the closest analog to that with his leap ability, but it requires a charge to get into the thick of things. Zarya was also a personal favorite of mine because of how reliable her bubble shields were as an off tank. I could defend the main tank, get some juice off of his shields, then poke enemies to death with the charged beam. And her graviton surge is just icing on the cake to her kit. I think it's like tanks in Overwatch have a minigame associated with them. With Zarya, you have to balance her shield charges to power up your attack. With Winston, you jump in, do a bubble weave, and then jump out once the bubble expires. Rinse and repeat. There doesn't feel like anything of the sort here. Once Rivals introduces a character with gameplay flow like that, you bet your sweet Bippy I'll be all over that. But as of right now, I just can't get the vibe. And going back to team-ups that I mentioned earlier, this is a feature unique to Rivals that I absolutely adore, both from a gameplay and a lore perspective. How it works is that when you pick a character, other players can choose another character that will hand out a passive buff to your chosen character. These abilities then give you a new passive or even a brand new active ability. One of my favorites is when Magneto teams up with Scarlet Witch, allowing him to channel chaos energy provided by his daughter to change his primary attack into a powerful short-range melee attack. Great for dealing with annoying hanger-on DPS characters or for hard pushing a group of enemies that are sitting on a point. Or there's the super cute team up that allows Groot to carry either Jeff the Shark or Rocket Raccoon on his shoulders, providing them with damage resistance and the ability to shoot and use abilities freely at the expense of Groot deciding where they go. Not only is it awesome to have a reason to play two characters you think would work well in a team up like you might have thought about in your imagination, but there is also a gameplay incentive in doing so as characters get new abilities and power-ups as a result. This is one major advantage that Rivals has to Overwatch, and it's not even close. It just makes sense, and it's crazy to me that this is only just now a thing that has been introduced, and the fact that new team-ups will be added over time makes me even more excited to see how that system will be expanded and built upon over time. Marvel Rivals is definitely a much faster game than Overwatch, and it's because of a couple different reasons. Attacks hit harder and there is constantly a lot happening all at once, but I would say overall the maps are much smaller and more compact. This means characters make their rollouts much faster, and getting around maps feels much more efficient. Marvel Rivals characters are not just fast, but they're agile without feeling too heavy. I think this is to help sell the feeling of being in a universe filled with godly characters of immense strength. They barrel through everything without a second thought, and sometimes they just bust down walls in their way. It all helps to sell the feeling of being a souped up freakazoid surrounded by other freakazoids. Some characters are even given the ability to just fly outright, which might feel really strong when you come from a game like Overwatch where characters like Pharah and Echo dominate the airspace, but it's not really a problem in Rivals because of the third-person perspective. Your view isn't limited to what's directly in front of you, but to what is all around you. You can see enemies above and below much easier without having to sacrifice your vision of the ground floor to look upward to shoot an aerial enemy, for instance. Maps are another huge part of hero shooters that can make or break a game. I will say that map design in Rivals doesn't quite hold a candle to the intricate maps of Overwatch. However, it does have the added benefit of maps having destructible environments and cover. Walls can be torn down, creating new vantage points or a new attack funnel for both sides to take advantage of. This easily makes up for the maps being somewhat standard in terms of assembly because it means every encounter in an area can go a couple different ways depending on how the surroundings are altered. It means new escape routes, new viewports for DPS. It's a lot of variance and gives the maps a sort of liveliness you don't see in Overwatch. And some even change drastically in the middle of a fight, making them just as alive as the heroes you control. My favorite example of this is the Hydra King of the Hill map. One of the maps will lift and lower the capture point as the match progresses, altering who has the upper hand with the point. If a team has the point captured while it's lower, it gives the opposing side the higher ground, favoring AoE damage, and it funnels the winning team into a bad position. But if it's higher, it forces both teams to be on equal footing as they reach the apex of the staircase, unless you're an airborne character that can see more than your average ground fighter. And it also gives an advantage to the team that owns the point, allowing them to shoot downward towards the opposing team. It brings a type of dynamism that is sorely needed and kind of makes it feel like Smash Bros in a way. The added layer of casualness with maps changing on the fly is what helps the game feel more engaging from a moment-to-moment level. It helps each push not feel like a stalemate. My one big complaint with maps is that the game does not explicitly state what side you are when you load in. You have to get your context clues from the text on the screen and where you spawn in order to find out. So if they could just add a little attacking or defending line above the objective flavor text, I would be so thankful for that. It would help me stop screaming at my team when we load in each and every time to know what the hell I'm supposed to be doing. Now, I do have to mention that momentum is a huge factor in Marvel Rivals. I find that very often the team in the lead will stay in the lead just because they have the momentum to keep pushing. Respawn timers are short in Marvel Rivals, so it leads players to trickle in only to die again and again. Once a a team is established on a point, it's difficult to get them off of said point with any abilities other than ults. To me, there is a very distinct lack of area denial characters that could really add something to the experience. Or maybe they're not present in the game currently because it would mean that matches would ultimately play slower? I can only speculate. Marvel Rivals is not perfect. Map variety is still very low at time of writing. There are only a handful of them, with the majority being repurposed to fit other modes, but it's a smart way to handle it and get content to the players quickly. As the game goes on, more maps will be added to spice up the gameplay, so that will be solved with time. And sure, character balance isn't fantastic from a higher level of players, but my ass is not here for the balancing. I'm literally just here for a good time. And I'm sure as shit having a good time. With more time, I'm sure I'll see some of the more fundamental issues with the game, but as of now, I couldn't be happier with how the game plays. It doesn't feel like a shield shooting sim like Overwatch devolved into, so I'll take what I can get at this point. But most of all, I think what sets Marvel Rivals apart from Overwatch at this point is that it's just fun. Overwatch hasn't been fun for me in a long time because of all the constant changes it has made to its fundamental gameplay formula. I know what I find fun won't be what everyone else finds fun, and not everyone will agree with what I have to say about Marvel Rivals, and that's totally chill. I came to Marvel Rivals to have a chill time with my buddies. I play Marvel Rivals to take me back to my days in college when all I was doing was flunking classes just so I could play more and more Overwatch. Games like this are just timeless. As long as you have a group, it will be fun no matter what. It will be a part of your gaming routine, not out of obligation, but out of enjoyment. And that's what makes Marvel Rivals so special. So I've gone through the goods and bads of Marvel Rivals. It's a great game. It's not perfect, of course, but the shortcomings are so easy to overlook when the rest of the game is this damn fun. We talked about how Marvel Rivals wipes the floor with Overwatch 2 in its current form, with its fast and fun combat, unique character rosters, and its willingness to embrace the chaotic nature of the 6v6 format. So now we get into the more meta part of the video. I want to talk about the philosophy that makes Marvel Rivals so different from Overwatch. And it all starts with expectations. When I bought Overwatch in 2016, I expected to have an enjoyable 6v6 team shooter that I could play for the rest of time. 8 years later, I can firmly say that that is no longer the case. Everything that has happened to Overwatch has broken my expectations, and not in a good way. It has betrayed me with constant changes to the service that it provides. It's not the game I bought. It sold me a false bill of goods when they said Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2 would run concurrently, side by side. But they lied, which is why I don't play anymore. They have broken my trust. So why should I believe anything they have to say about the game now or in the future? I know firsthand what it feels like to be shit on again and again by Blizzard and their handling of Overwatch. They lied. They broke every expectation I had. So now I will never come back to it. When I boot up Marvel Rivals, I know what I'm getting into. At least for now. I really don't want to jinx it into becoming just another Overwatch 1 situation. But I have a hunch it won't happen, because Marvel Rivals launched free to play with an extensive cash shop along with it, which I am all in favor of because it is purely cosmetic. NetEase said outright that all future playable characters and maps would be free. Every season pass added to the game will be permanent and available to access, meaning a person playing 4 years from now can log in and start earning rewards from the very first battle pass. This isn't the game swapping from being a paid entry and letting the players be able to earn skins just by playing, only to swap to a grindy money-grubbing cash shop where these skins I earned are now labeled with an outrageously priced $10 price tag. Marvel Rivals hasn't broken my trust. It laid out all the ground rules, said, "This is what I am," and I said, "Bet." And just like that, it worked for them. It worked big time. Players are staying and playing. They're making absurd amounts of content for the game. It's basically a renaissance for the 6v6 hero shooter, all because they were honest about the game they wanted to make. No hands were stepped on. No promises were broken. It was made, it was released, and it was good. Simple as that. Turns out you don't need to alienate your fan base to generate profits. You can just make a genuine service, a genuine game with passionate developers and people will come to that. I was more than happy to pay for that Psylocke skin because I'm an adult. I have disposable income to spend. And it's hot. I'm generally not a fan of microtransactions in general, but I was okay with this one. It will probably be the only amount of money I spend on the game in general, but if something does pop up that fancies my interest, I would have no qualms with buying anything for Rivals because at least it didn't boldface lie to me and shit in my shoes. What's really interesting is that I think the release of Marvel Rivals caused a bit of a stir over at Blizzard. They saw that all of their retired players had moved on and were scrambling desperately to pull them back in. Their downline was crumbling and the new kid on the block was to blame. It's like, my guy, you kicked those people out when you made the game something completely different. Why are you fighting so hard to get these people back? You already lied to them time and time again. Why would they come back? And with the Overwatch Spotlight that I mentioned earlier, what I saw did not move me to go back in the least. It's funny, Blizzard will do anything to get people to play Overwatch except make it the game that got people into it in the first place. Now the only thing Overwatch is good for is running mediocre skin collabs with other IPs and K-pop groups to sell more skins. Is the current state of Overwatch to be blamed on Blizzard themselves or Activision? I want to say Activision, but the fact that someone over at Blizzard thought that making a sequel to a game that wasn't a sequel and was actively a detriment to the game was a good idea makes my brain wander. There was a limited time event in Overwatch 2 where you could just play Overwatch Classic, which just saying that makes me want to gag. Overwatch Classic, bro. What a joke. A limited time mode that was only brought on for 3 weeks until it disappeared back into the Blizzard vaults, only to be brought back by popular demand. Yeah, right. These upcoming Season 15 changes, the limited time classic mode, the major updates that were showcased in the Overwatch Spotlight, it's all too little too late, man. You had your chance. You squandered it. And now you're just trying to make up for lost time because a huge market share that you neglected has abandoned you for greener pastures. Abandoned for a game that doesn't sell the player a false bill of goods. Abandoned for a game that actually listens to its player base instead of insisting time and time again that the developers know best from the game when clearly they don't. Or else they wouldn't be floundering to bring back everyone who left. Marvel Rivals and the people developing it know what's good, so they push forward, making something they like and something others would also like. It's hard not to see the amount of passion and creativity on display in the game, despite how much influence it takes from the king that once ruled the market. No one king rules forever, but in this instance, the crown doesn't go to the successor. The crown went to the one that earned it by being genuine and true to itself, the one that deserves to have it. And so the people rejoice. If the Steam charts number is anything to go by, 250,000 people are still enjoying the game a few months post-release. Truly a testament to how good the game is. And if you're going to tell me that people are only still playing because of the Marvel IP, tell that to the canned live service Avengers game. There is something here that people have been longing for, but it just took a game with a huge recognizable cast of characters for it to truly take off. In order to take on royalty, you have to already have an established name, and Marvel was the one for the job. Marvel Rivals is the king we needed in these troubling times. That's not to say that it will be a perfect king that will reign without issue, but what we have now, with the content cadence that has already been established, the game will only get better and better with time. Marvel Rivals deserves its own success because it was never truly in competition with Overwatch. Overwatch gave up a long time ago, so there wasn't even anything to challenge. Blizzard and Activision lost sight of the original vision of Overwatch, a casual, friendly 6v6 team shooter. It left all of that behind to create Overwatch 2, The Search for More Money. It couldn't be any clearer what their goal of the game was at that point. I miss Overwatch. Or maybe I miss the idea of Overwatch. Not because of nostalgia, but because Overwatch 1 was this stupid, brilliant, and fun experience that no other game was able to replicate until now. It can't be replicated in its entirety because it was a game of its time. But Marvel Rivals sure does come damn close. No, it's not perfect, but it still has everything I need in order to feel what was lost. I still get that same vibe that I lost when Overwatch 1 ceased to exist. It's hard to feel anything but skeptical in today's gaming landscape, but Marvel Rivals brings the fun back to the hero shooter while still actively building upon the formula in new and unique ways that helps it stand out in its own right. I know it won't last. Hell, it probably won't last long at all. But for now, I'm going to savor every last battle. But that's just what I think. What do you think about Marvel Rivals? Do you like it? Does it remind you of the heydays of Overwatch? I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments section below. Special thanks goes out to my channel members listed here, with extra special thanks going to my $3 channel member, Cilantro. These fine folks help to keep me writing and creating, and I truly would not be here without their support. If you would like to support me as well, you can become a channel member yourself by clicking the join button below next to the like and subscribe buttons. I cannot believe it, but Monster Hunter Wilds is just around the corner. I might even take all of February to play it and then come back in March to talk about it. But I got a key for Avowed and I will be reviewing that as my next video, so please stay tuned for when that does release. And as always, this has been Testing Triangles. Thanks for watching.